and let me explain more. So we basically were talking, there's an argument between Maran and Ramah. Maran says that if you interrupt after making the blessing between bread, between the blessing on bread, and it was not something that you're allowed to talk about, like something to do with the meal, then you have to go back and repeat the bracha. The question now is, what happens if you're being hosted by somebody and they make a hamutzi? So they ate the bread, but you interrupted. Or they interrupted, but somebody else already ate the bread, or whatever other scenario that was. Ramah seems to say, based on a rokeach, that says that as long as the host ate bread, it counts for you. Nobody at the table actually has to eat bread. The only reason we eat a little bit of bread is because of the mitzvah. That's what the Ramah says. And we went to show last night that the Ramah is also relying on an Or Zawah. The Or Zawah says not like that. What does it mean that you don't have to taste from the bread? You don't have to taste from the bread that he made hamotzi on. But you have to taste from the bread that you're going to eat at your meal. And so the premise that Ramah just based himself on fell down. So now we are, if you look in page 356 from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 lines up from the bottom. The first word on line is Hamivarech.
Back to 351, you're saying?
356.
56. Okay.
9 lines from...
Starts with a vav, right? Yeah.
The first word starts with a hey. Hamivarech. Okay, count.
Yeah, I see.
8 lines up. I'm sorry, 8 lines up. Hamvarech. So follow me to the period in the middle of that sentence. V'chen hiskimu. V'chen hiskimu acharonim rabim divrei Bet Yosef v'delo karokach. And therefore, based on this flawed understanding towards Zawah, many of the charonim choose to rule like Maran and not like the Rokach, even though they're Ashkenazi. So it's not an Ashkenazi Sephardic divide. This is a divide between those who understand the premise of the Rokach to be flawed and therefore rule like Maran, and those who don't. Let's skip 3 lines down. The first word on the line. V'ayen be'el Yarabba. Look in the book Yarabba. Shevi b'shem sever Tanya Rabti. Brings the name of Tanya Rabti. דמשמע כדברי בית יוסף, והמשנה ברורה כתב, the Mishnah Berurah writes, שכמעט כל האחרונים חולקים בזה על הרמ"א. That almost all the האחרונים disagree with the Ramah about this. That's what Mishnah says. Almost all the האחרונים disagree with the Ramah about this halakha. ובביאור הלכה כתב להשיג לרמ"א, and in the ביאור הלכה he argues with the Ramah, שאף ההוזרוע לא אומר כלל בידון הרמ"א, אלא כתב רק שנן צריך לשולחן מהפת, שהבוצע עליו והמברך שבצע עליה המברך ומותרים לכל פת אחרת, ושאף ברוקח יש לפרש דלא כרמה. And he says, listen, Mishnah Berurah, his commentary, Biur Halacha, says that this entire premise of the Ramah is incorrect, and rather we are talking about a situation where the Rokach was talking about a situation where, or Zawah really, that the host made hamotzi, and you didn't yet eat from his roll, but you ate from your roll. It doesn't make a difference if he ate or not. You were Yotzei lebracha, and you're Yotzei, you're eating by eating from your bread. That which he says you don't have to eat from the bread doesn't mean you have to eat from any bread. Just you have to eat from the bread that he made a blessing on. On the top left of 357. וכן יש לפרש בריקנטי, בריקנטי, שובה בני רבה, ולכן נקרא בית יוסף, and you can also explain this, and therefore says Mishnah Berurah, its main halacha is like Maran. I don't know who that is, but he said it's printed in the back, in the handwriting, in the back of the new Shulchan Aruch. That he spends a long time trying to justify Maran. דכתב שף הרוקח לא נתכוון לומר שסחו השומעים אינם צריכים לחזור לברך, אלא כמותו שהמברך עצמו סח אחר שטעם קודם שטעמו השומעים, ובזה דווקא אינם צריכים לחזור לברך. מכל מקום כתב שבדעת הרמ"א אי אפשר לפרש, כן דמוכה כמדבר בדרכי משה. He says really he understands the Rokach saying something else. What is the Rokach saying? That the host made a blessing on bread. The host then ate from the bread. After the host ate from the bread, he spoke. Before the guests ate. So when did he speak? Post bracha or post eating bread?
Both.
After eating bread. but before the guest ate the bread. That's the case the Rokach is talking about. And therefore the Ramah is not only not basing himself correctly on the Rokach, but the Rokach is talking about a completely different scenario. But he says, you should know you can't explain this in the Ramah, because the Ramah doesn't read the Rokach that way. The Ramah reads the Rokach in the way that we read last night. And therefore, we're now dealing with halakha. Ulinyan halakha, page 357 in the middle left column. Ulinyan halakha, according to halakha. הנה אף על פי שרובה דרבובתא ורבותינו האחרונים הסכימו וזה דברי מרן בית יוסף. Even though the majority of the Charonim rule like Maran. Now watch what he's going to do. We always hate it. How can we follow Maran? How can we follow Maran? All of a sudden, this happened before. Rabbi Yosef's family and many other Sfaradim have this opinion that if there are those who argue with Maran when it comes to brachot, you shouldn't make the bracha. So they don't really follow Maran all the way. They say they follow Maran all the way, but not all the way. Because this is still an argument, even though most people agree with Maran. Because still we never settled the argument among the Rishonim. ומצאנו בהדיעה לערבייה והרדב"א שכתבו שיצא ידי חובה, and we find the Ravia and the Ridba both say that a person fulfilled their obligation. יש לומר בספק ברכות להקל. You have to say סבן, ספק ברכות להקל. When you're in doubt, you don't make a blessing. ואף במקום שדעת מרן שולחן ערוך לברך, even though Maran has an opinion that you should say the blessing, דעת החידה בשו"ת חיים שאל, the חיda's opinion in book חיים שאל, וכמה מהאחרונים, and some of the אחרונים, דאמרים בספק ברכות להקל, that you can say sabal, you can make a doubt in blessings even against the opinion of Maran. This is a newer Sephardic halakha which says we follow Maran except for. Here's one of the except fors. And therefore, I don't wish to go through the rest of this footnote, but I'll explain outside. That his conclusion is what he said last night. And his conclusion is, if you would like to not stick your head in this war between the Rishonim, find someone else to make the blessing for you who wasn't in the room when the host made a bracha. And if you wish to just rule like Maran and make a blessing, you can, because halakha is like Maran, even though there are many who argue with him. So he's trying to give like a middle scenario. He's trying to find a way out of this argument. In the Bet Midrash of Haraperet's rule is Maran says to make a bracha, you can make a bracha. If most of the Charonim among the Ashkenazim agree with Maran and not like the Ramah, so even Ashkenazim can make a bracha, they don't have to worry that they're following somehow an opinion that is not acceptable among the Ashkenazi poskim. Yeah? Page 358.
I have a question. Is this analogous to washing your hands and then talking and then going back and saying the bracha? Or washing your hands?
Analogous in what sense?
Well, the person is saying it, the leader is saying it for you, and it has a binding force, motzi, on your eating the bread, right?
Right.
So you talk, and before he eats it, that's the case?
Right. Now, with washing hands.
Yeah, so in this case, someone who's washed his hands, does it for himself, but talks before motzi. So some people go back and if he talks, he forgets, he talks, they go back and they say the bracha again for washing your hands.
Right. So for that, they're fulfilling the biblical prohibition of do not say my name in vain. There's not one posek, not one who, in any case, that talking after washing hands would require them to go back and wash their hands again. I mean, there's not one posek that held that way.
Why do so many people do it?
Why are there 1 billion Christians in the world? I don't know. I mean, there's not the Rosh, who's the one who came up with this idea that you shouldn't talk between washing hands and hamotzi. He only took that on as a stringency. I mean, if he would mess up, okay, he messed up. It was a stringency. It wasn't a halakha. There's nobody who ruled that way. Even the Ramah doesn't rule that way. In which case, I'm actually not. I mean, I'm sure I know how they got there. They're applying all these halachot, yes, to that situation. But that's an original. I mean, that's novel halachic thought of the 21st century because nobody before then decided to do that.
Okay.
So you're right. These laws sound familiar because these are the laws that they tell you about not interrupting after washing hands.
Yeah.
But there's nobody who actually makes that application.
Hmm.
To the best of my knowledge. Okay, 359. Aniyat amen udvarim shebekdusha bervacha lediman. Answering amen and any other dvarim shebekdusha, like any other amen or kaddish or anything else that's prayer oriented, between blessing hamutzi and eating bread. So imagine this. Imagine you make a hamutzi on your bread, and you happen to be sitting in the back of the synagogue, and somebody starts saying kaddish. Now you have an obligation to answer amen, but you're also in between the blessing and eating your bread. Or someone says Baruch Hashem v'lach. You have an obligation to respond, but now you're in the middle between blessing and eating your bread. What do you do in that kind of situation?
Well, according to what we said earlier, if you're talking about the mitzvah, you can talk. But this
So
will
is saying
not be
amen
right.
on kaddish have to do with the mitzvah of eating or having
No,
bread?
it doesn't, but we know we can interrupt.
Right, so here we're going to have to see if we can in this case.
Oh, and you also made the statement about Kiddush, where on Friday night we say B'rei Priagafen, but then we say another blessing before we drink the wine.
That's right, but that blessing has to do with the
What
wine.
has to do with that?
Here, we're not dealing with something that has to do with your bread. I mean, maybe you want to say that, let's say someone else is making a hamotzi, so you answer amen to their hamotzi. Okay, that's an interesting question. Here, it's just a kaddish, or just a baruch hu. It's let's see instead. If after you made the blessing of hamotzi, kodem shatita'am min apad, before you tasted from the bread, shama dvarim shebekdusha, you heard something, we call them dvarim shebekdusha, anything which halachically requires you to respond to. Higon kaddish, or kedusha, or baruch hu, any of those prayers. Eno rashai la'anot, you're not allowed to answer amen. You're in a place in your blessing that you're not allowed to respond even to kaddish. And therefore, if you hear a blessing from your friend, kodem hatima, before you eat your bread, you're not allowed to answer amen after him. And that applies, Baruch, our theory was incorrect. And even if you hear your friend make a hamotzi, you're not allowed to answer amen after that. I mean, even though that blessing has to do with a meal, but you can. Now, my father-in-law's family has minhag. I don't know if it's a minhag. I don't know where it comes from. I don't understand it. Until today I don't understand it. Now it just got worse. That my father-in-law makes hamotzi, or maybe not. He gives the 2 chalot to Jack to make hamotzi. Jack doesn't eat it. Then pass to Baruch. Baruch makes hamotzi. Pass to Dan. Dan makes hamotzi. None of you eat it.
It's the
Pass
same
it to
2
Rafael.
loaves.
Same 2 loaves. He makes hamotzi. Pass it back to him. He makes hamotzi and then he eats it.
It's almost
And it has
reform,
that.
where the reform like pass it around.
That's what they're doing. And
Why?
because everybody should say their hamotzi.
Like Kiddush, so everybody saves their own.
Right, that's what it's like. No, but by Kiddush, at least, they're drinking their own wine.
Yeah.
Imagine if everybody made Kiddush, and then you made Kiddush and they drank your wine. That's what they do by hamotzi. It's not just my father, it's many Hasidic families I've been with. And here the thing, that like, according to this, you can't, once you make a hamotzi, and then Baruch makes a bracha, you can't answer amen to his blessing anymore, because now you're in this pause between blessing and eating bread. I always reject the offer to make my own hamotzi, and they look at me like I'm crazy.
There's someone's house I go to, and they used to keep insisting that I make my own Kiddush, and finally got up and trained now. Now they know when I'm there, don't even ask.
It's okay. Listen, if you want to make your own
You don't
kiddush,
say your
at least there you're drinking your own wine. Here, it's not like they're giving each of us 2 rolls to make our own hamotzi on. We're all
They're
making
just
hamotzi on
passing
the
the
same
same
bread,
way.
and we're still waiting afterwards for this guy, and we're answering amen to everybody else's brachot. It's like a
It
triple
goes around and goes
problematic.
back to the host, and he still has to eat.
Correct.
Wow.
Anytime all the
In that situation, let's say then he cuts it up and then he starts talking. 'Cause that's what he does after he eats. But I don't know if that's the same situation where you heard his bracha and you could rely on his eating. I mean, even according to the Ramah, you made your own bracha and you didn't eat yet. Could be a problem. I don't know why somebody would do that. I'll ask.
So
I'll
can I, you've been talking about the leader saying the motzi first and then passing around the bread. Is it right, or is it preferable for the leader not to talk at all until everybody's eating the bread? Or is it okay for the leader to give directions on
That's a
something?
fantastic question. We're in the middle of discussing that right now.
Okay.
Okay? If you don't get an answer by the end of these shulim, bug me for it.
You'll be the first to know.
Alright, so umikol makom, second paragraph. Nonetheless, b'diavad, after the fact, imana dvarim shebekdusha chabarat hamotzi. If you answer amen or kaddish or baruch hu afterwards, kodem atima, before you taste the bread. V'chein imana amen achab b'chaz shama mechavu, or you answer amen from your friend who made a blessing, like a hamotzi blessing. Sometimes it happens that you're saying hamotzi and there's somebody still washing their hands in the sink, so you're answering amen after their blessing. Eino chozam v'lech, you don't have to go back and make the blessing again. So you're not allowed to make this blessing. Or you're not allowed to answer this blessing, but you wouldn't go back and repeat it again. And even if you answer amen at the end of your own blessing, you don't go back because there's safek brachot akel. Again, the same rule: when in doubt. When in doubt, do not make a bracha. There are times where you have to answer amen after yourself. You know that?
For yourself.
After yourself, meaning you wouldn't find this in Ashkenazi communities, but in Sephardic communities, the ruling of the Talmud is this way. Every end bracha, at the end of a series of brachot, they require amen afterwards. So, for example, Yishtabach Shimcha Anad Malkeinu El HaMelech HaGadol HaKadosh Baruch HaShem HaBocher. What have we finished? Melech HaOlamim Amen. We say our own amen there.
Do you say it just when you're alone?
Yeah.
Say it to yourself?
Amen. Yeah.
You say the motzi and then amen?
And also, no, not hamotzi. I'm talking about in the Yishtabach Shemcha.
Oh, no, but I mean.
Or also
for-
you find where else? You find by
No, Birchat HaMazon. I think after the
very good,
second
very
or
good. That's
fourth
right.
blessing.
Where else do you find this? By the blessing of the Haftarah.
Yeah.
Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen. You say your own amen there. Ashkenazim don't, and North African Jews don't. But the minhag according to Halakha, Shulchan Aruch, is like that.
I think Kaddish also.
By Kaddish, oh, by interesting. By Kaddish, you're not saying amen. You're saying v'imru amen, and you should say amen.
Oh.
You wouldn't answer. You don't say v'imru amen, amen.
Oh.
So when you're washing your hands, you say it to yourself.
No, so we're saying what happens if you make the blessing hamotzi and then you answer amen after your own blessing. Sometimes I'll help somebody make a blessing, right? I'll tell them, Baruch, Baruch, Shakol, Shakol,
Yeah.
and I say amen, and they go amen. You shouldn't do that. Don't say amen. It's interrupting between your blessing and your drinking. That's why I'm repeating the blessing to them word by word. Imagine if someone did that. They shouldn't answer amen then, but if they
Yes,
did, it's
okay.
okay. It doesn't.
Alright.
It doesn't make them have to go back and wash it again. David HaMelech says that Am Haaretz, an ignoramus cannot be righteous. The reason is if you're an ignoramus, how are you supposed to be righteous? I mean, you have to study a lot to be able to observe halakha. There's this idea like there's 36 simple people in the world that the whole world rests on them and they're the biggest. It can't be. It can't be there are people that are so simple that they hold up the whole world. It can't be. I'm sure there are those who disagree. But the bui rechet, an ignoramus cannot be a fear of sin, cannot be a tzaddik. A good person for sure,
Yeah.
but an ignoramus, that tzaddik, absolutely not. It doesn't qualify. How are you supposed to observe Shabbat if you don't know laws of Shabbat? How can you eat kasher if you don't know laws of kasher? I went to somebody's house. Somebody, by the way, for years, how lenient I was about kashrut. So one day I come to their kitchen. It happened to be they were putting up mezuzot in their house, whatever it was, and it happened to be in the kitchen. I saw them making a salad. And the other one's like, oh, we can't follow Rabbi Yonatan. You know, he says you can have the orange juice without the OKP on it. And I saw them using balsamic vinegar. And actually, I would never call them out on purpose. I was very simple. Wow, they have this kosher balsamic vinegar was like an Italian balsamic vinegar. It wasn't just like the Kedem brand you get over there in the Ralph's. And I took the bottle, didn't have any shit on it. And I realized at that point, like, oops, I shouldn't have said anything.
No, this is not kosher
But
food.
they had no idea that balsamic vinegar is made from wine and it has to have a kosher symbol on it. They thought it was just like white vinegar or apple cider vinegar or something.
Yeah.
And then, like, they thought that they were super glad kosher. But in truth, their balsamic vinegar is yain nesach. I mean, it's a prohibited wine. At the best, tam yanam.
And they spread it all over there. They probably put it in their meat. They
It
put it
says
all
in
over
their
their
meat, very
salad.
good. So I use this for everything. It's all right,
Oops.
okay. It's a very complicated situation. From there, I learned a long time ago that the difference between religious people and mamash, those who know halakha, it's not the same thing. I don't trust regular religious people. Those who know how to learn, they've made an attempt to study things. In fact, sometimes it's those who are not born observant. Sometimes even those who are not born Jewish, but mostly they're not. Because they study halakha when they're more mature. And someone who wasn't observant when they were young. Now they learn halakha when they were 30 or when they were 40. They actually had an adult brain inside of their head when they learned. Sometimes those people, they're it's not just learned, so much more particular about halakha in a proper fashion. Because they know, because they weren't neglected to be taught a certain halakha. They don't have a way they did things before they learned for themselves. And in fact, the kashrut in those places are super, rarely found kashrut problems there. The offside is, well, that's why my mother did it. What do you want from me? Well, this one doesn't have a mother who did it, so there's no blaming the mother.
Well, there's a lot of rules to remember and stuff. Like, I didn't know vinegar was.
It is a lot of rules. So
Yeah.
not all vinegar, but
I
the
don't-
vinegars that
well,
originate from
Although I don't
wine.
use vinegar, but I didn't
Yeah.
know this.
So, for example, white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar. A lot of by the way, nowadays I noticed in many products they're using, instead of sweeteners, they want to write, no sugar, no artificial sweetener, no added sugar. They're using a lot of white grape juice to flavor things.
Yeah.
Oh.
That poses a problem for us in terms of kashrut.
Yeah, they think they're doing us a favor,
Right. I mean,
a health favor.
and maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know what the status of white grape juice is in health.
They're making it
circles, but
organic, more organic, or
Maybe. I mean, I can't imagine
Yeah, I
the thing
don't-
with 75 ingredients now that has white grape juice is more healthy for you. But they're trying to do that, and it could be. I don't know. It could be the price of grape juice or grape products went down for some reason that it makes sense for them to use that over something else. Like many of the food products. The reason they got rid of animal products in their food is not because they love the Jewish community. It just they found cheaper chemicals than
Yeah.
using that. Like for
Cheaper
Skittles.
replacements.
Skittles
Yeah.
is my favorite example.
What is it?
cheaper
Skittles.
substitutes.
Don't they're not good
Oh,
for you. Don't
yeah.
eat Skittles. But they're 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 kosher. Skittles are kosher. Now they've been kosher for a long time. The three problematic ingredients that could have been in Skittles, really the only two, because I don't think the third one ever existed there, was the gelatin in the Skittle. They no longer do that. They have something else they use, because why pay for pig skins when I can use a chemical that does the same thing? So I don't remember what they used, but they took out gelatin a number of years ago. They then had grape juice flavoring for their purple Skittles. But today they don't do that. They have a chemical that tastes like grapes. And so what's the purpose of having grape juice? They took that out too. There were some candies that had carmine in it. Carmine is a crushed red bug, which is kosher. HaShamayim Sfarad ate carmine. And so did Chamashas. In Israel, the chief rabbinate approves carmine to be kosher for use. Any food that you buy in Israel that has carmine in it is labeled kosher. If you want a Mahadran certificate, the carmine has to be 12 months aged, so that it loses its status of fresh carmine and becomes aged carmine to the point where it's now not considered food in the eyes of these strict rabbis. But both of those things that are, it's normal in Israel that any gelatin product has a chief rabbinate symbol on it. It comes to America, it's from the chief rabbinate, it has gelatin. It must be. No, that gelatin comes from a pig. The chief rabbinate doesn't agree with American kashrut standards at prohibiting gelatin. The famous case of that are the Israeli hot dogs. Dan might remember. My aunt Esther has these. They're like, I don't know what they are. They're like hot dog links. They're kind of wrapped together in they have like a plastic wrap on them of sorts, and they fry them. So these sausage links
They're tied together.
are tied together with a very thin. It looks like it's not plastic. It's
It's the gut of a
very good.
animal of
It's
some
the
kind.
intestine of a cow.
intestine. Yeah.
They slaughter the animal. This comes from Japan. The Israeli ones come from Japan. And for years there were wars in the chief rabbinate. Does this have the same status of gelatin? Because they basically it's just the lining. It has no meat. I don't know if I don't know exactly the status of it. The Sephardic chief rabbi always held it was kosher, like gelatin. The Ashkenazi rabbi always held it wasn't kosher, like gelatin. So there was the war, and ultimately they decided, when the two last chief rabbis became chief rabbis, it was one of their famous halachic rulings. Not free the agunot, to not solve the denominational problem. The Kotel was what to do about the kashrut of the hot dogs. And what they determined was that if they follow the Sephardic chief rabbi, the hot dogs will be labeled as kosher, but not lemehadrim. And if they follow the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, then the hot dogs will be able to be followed lemehadrim. So they both use cow intestines. The regular kashrut in Israel allows them from non-kosher slaughtered cows, and the chief rabbi, the Ashkenazi one, wants them to be from kosher slaughtered cows, and that's the difference in those hot dogs. Both of them would come stateside, and nobody would know the difference.
Yeah.
Or Jews go to Israel's office, and they're good actually, they eat it. They don't know these are the things that they told them in America. It's like eating a pig. No, it is eating a pig. It is a pig. What do you want? In Israel, pigs are kosher.
Yeah, what, 50% of the people probably have pigs, eat pigs.
Well, this is. I'm not talking about a real. I'm talking
No,
about
I know,
gelatin.
but I mean-
For example, you have this with there's two Bate Din in England. I don't know, one's Manchester or one's London, something like that. I remember the candies from one of them was always cheaper than the other one, and I would always buy candies for my nieces and nephews. I was asking them why. Why should I pay more for that? Oh, the gelatin here is mehadrin. What's mehadrin? So this one comes from the Bedin in England, which says that not kosher animal gelatin is fine, and this one doesn't. So for me, that was fine. I took those, and anyways, the fish gelatin tastes like fish. All the candies taste like fish, so we skip them anyways. But
Okay.
Something's fishy about that story.
Yeah, there's something fishy about that.
today, when you buy products, many products are writing the type of gelatin that it is. So they write gelatin, they write bovine or porcine. I don't know if it was a word, but it is.
Porcine.
Porcine, is that how you say it? Porcine. They write those next to the gelatin so you know which type of animal it comes from.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a difference halachically. I mean, if gelatin's okay, it comes from a cow or from a pig. If gelatin is not okay, then it doesn't make a difference where it comes from. It has to come from a kosher slaughtered source or from a fish. But that's just something interesting to know. How do we get there? What are we talking about that got us there?
Guts.
Guts.
From bread to guts.
Let's see here, 361. הפסק אחר טימאה קודם בליעה. This is so micro-detailed. Maran only mentions one halakha. We made 1,000 chapters out of it. What happens if you make a hefsek after you taste the bread, but before you swallow the bread?
This is called hypothetical 101.
Well, I think people do this all the time. They put bread in their mouth and they start talking. But they didn't actually eat the bread. Or is tasting eating? That's what we would have to figure out here.
Yeah.
What does eating the bread mean? At which point can you talk? Now the fact that this question didn't bother Maran is interesting. But clearly it bothers us. לכתחילה, ideally, לא ידבר אפילו אחר שסבר את המוציא ונתן הפת לתוך פיו. You should not speak after you made hamotzi, even when the bread is in your mouth. כל זמן שלא בלעה מקצת ממנה, as long as you do not swallow a little bit of it. ואפילו בדברי תורה יש להחמיר לכתחילה. And even with words of Torah, you should ideally be strict. שלא ידבר קודם שיבלע. You cannot speak even words of Torah until you swallow. ובדיעבד, אם דבר אחר שנתן הפת לתוך פיו, אפילו עדיין לא בלע ממנו כלל, ואפילו בדברים בטנים אינו חוזר מברך. But once you already put the bread in your mouth, even though you didn't swallow, and you speak even about mundane things, you don't have to go back and recite a blessing. So tasting, it's important to swallow, but swallowing, if you didn't swallow and you spoke, it's okay as long as you tasted the bread. So tasting is sufficient after the fact, but ideally we're hoping that you'll swallow first.
It's almost like the kids that like hide the stuff they don't want to eat.
This ties into an argument elsewhere. Whether, let's say you're tasting food, but not swallowing it.
Yeah.
Like sometimes some people will taste a little bit of soup and spit out whatever they're cooking.
Why do they
Taste
spit
it for
out?
flavor.
Why would they spit it out?
Wine
I don't
tasting.
know why. I don't do it, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, the purpose of taste is to get a taste and not to taste it. You got to swallow it because tasting is only
Swallowing
half of it.
as well.
Swallow it is part
It's
of
part
it.
of the process.
Yeah. So I don't know why you'd spit it out unless you're afraid of eating without saying bracha.
A lot of times it's missing, it's not enough spices in it or not enough
And
salt
there's
in
a
it
halakha
or
also,
something.
like, what happens if you see a piece of meat and you don't know if it was kasher yet or not? What is kasher?
Salted.
It was salted.
You salt and water.
I believe there's a Taz. The Taz says you could pick up the meat and lick it.
Really?
All right.
Because if meat is salted properly, which may tell you that a lot of our meat is not salted properly, but I won't go down that road right now.
I think
If
you're right.
your meat
but,
is salted properly,
I think you're right.
it will be salty.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at it, it'll be
Kosher
salty.
meat, there are many chefs that won't touch kosher meat with a 10-foot pole. Because they claim that we are so used to eating a salty chicken or a salty meat that we don't realize how not salty their meat is. I don't know, I don't have any experience, but that's what I've heard. Our parents did this once. He was in a country, I don't want to say where, and he decided there was a butcher that was making problems with the rabbi. He went to the butcher shop, and he asked the butcher, this is something, I'm not, even if I knew where, I wouldn't tell you, so I wouldn't get in trouble. The butcher, they wanted to see if the butcher really salts the meat properly. He told the butcher, can you get me something from the back of the store? While he was back, he went behind the counter and licked a piece of meat.
Aye. Gross.
And he summoned the rabbi who was the head of the kashrut, and he said, I want to see right now how you salt your chickens. And what did he do? He would take his chickens and he would shove them into like a crate, like those milk crates? And then he would sprinkle salt on top of the crates. So it looks like they're coated in salt, but they're not actually fully salted.
Yeah.
And that's how he did his salting. And the rabbi, not the rabbi of the community, the rabbi of the kashrut was getting paid enough that he looked the other way. And how did Apel to know that it wasn't salted? Because he licked it, and he said it wasn't salty enough to be salted. Now the question here, don't get grossed out. I'm not here to tell you. The question is, how can you lick something? This is a biblical prohibition. Meaning, if you lick it and it's salty, so you licked a kosher piece of meat. There's no prohibition on that. But if you licked it and it's not salty, that means it's not a kosher piece of meat, which is a biblical prohibition. So how do you enter a place of doubt by a biblical commandment?
But he's not eating it technically, right? He's just tasting
Very
it.
good.
or
That's what the
something.
Taz says. The Taz says that tasting it is different than eating it.
It's not easy.
Yeah, but tasting it, in order to eat it, I mean, the whole purpose of kashrut is the taste. You're tasting the food. That's what causes you not to mix meat and milk, for example.
You're correct. So here in the notes there's a conversation. How much tasting is tasting? How much eating is eating? If we stand here to split hairs, we'll be here until next year. But this is really a conversation. It's better when you make a bracha. Don't talk until you. It doesn't have to be bread. It's a fruit. It's a piece of cheese. Whatever it is. Don't speak until you have swallowed at least a little bit of the food. Yeah, I think this is actually prevalent that people speak once the bread is in their mouth before they swallow anything. You should still. I technically don't have to go back, but really shouldn't do it. Now, page 363. We'll finish the last 3 sentences for today. V'im and if after you put the bread in your mouth, kodem shivla, but before you swallow, shama dvarim shebekdusha, then you hear kaddish or kedusha or baruch hu. So we said before that you shouldn't, if you're after hamotzi but you didn't taste the bread, you shouldn't interrupt to answer kaddish. The question is, what happens now when the bread is in your mouth? So you've tasted it but you haven't swallowed it yet. You're allowed to answer amen even on an ideal level. If you hear a blessing from your friend, you're allowed to answer amen, meaning that tasting the bread is not enough for you to talk, but it's enough for you to be able to answer kaddish. Swallowing allows you to do everything, but tasting is enough to let you go with kaddish and baruch hu. Next week, next week, they're not called next week. So Shana.
Yeah.
And the following week, what day is Yom Kippur?
Wednesday.
Tuesday night?
Tuesday night and Wednesday.
I doubt we're gonna have to call it Monday night too.
Yeah.
And the following week is Sukkot.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then Thanksgiving.
But I'll tell you, we stopped at a very good spot because the next halakha is all about feeding animals first and how much do animals need to be fed first? Can you taste your food? Remember we said that if you say hamotzi, you could say, oh, go feed this person,
Yeah.
go feed the animals. So the question is it better for you to taste your bread first and then send them, swallow the bread, then send them? Is it so important that you can't even taste your food? Meaning, before you taste, you should send someone to feed the animals. We're going to talk about all of that when we get back. Everybody should have a k'tiva v'chatima tova.